right, we're here talking to Mike Stevens. I've made up some questions to ask him about his life and his childhood. So I figure we're just going to go through these and have him tell us a little bit about his life and stuff like that. So
Before we start, Craig,
sure.
I'd like to thank you for doing this. I think it's really neat. I don't think I've ever, in fact, I know I've never gone back through and tried to think of the times and whatnot of my growing up. So this is going to be a kind of a fun thing, I think, for me. I hope it's informative and maybe inspirational to the kids and whoever else watches it. So I do want to say, sincerely thank you.
All right.
And then I also would like to thank Diana for picking out my wardrobe. She's responsible for the hat and the shirt. And then our good neighbors, former neighbors, the Greens, furnished the pants and the socks. So I furnish my own beer. Nobody buys me beer. I buy my own. So with that said,
Right.
I'm sincerely grateful for you for doing this. And
Thank you. Yeah. So what would you say, what are some of your very first memories of childhood, and what did you and your family do for fun when you were younger?
Well, childhood, that was a long time ago. 67 right now, soon to be 68, so go back that many years. But a few things come to mind, and there's a lot I think that's there, but grew up with 2 other brothers and 2 other sisters, and we were all very close. In fact, at one point, to give you an idea, Brother Jim was 6, I was 5, Sister Jane was 4, Sister Joe was 2, and Brother Mark was 1. So you can see we're bunched in together there, and it was, being the second oldest, why it lended you some what I guess would be authority, and you could be a boss, except when the big brother decided to speak. But I remember at Christmas time, for example, a lot of presents, a lot of chaos, ripping boxes open, tearing stuff up, and really playing with the toys just a short amount of time, and then playing with the boxes. So Christmas was always an exciting time. When we were little, we had neighbors. There was a bunch of kids in the neighborhood, so we played outside a lot. And you rode your bicycle, or and when you were real little, you had a tricycle, and so you were outside a lot playing. And we had 2 feed mills in our community. And as we got a little bit older, we were allowed to get out of the yard and go down the road a little bit, a block or 2, because there wasn't a lot of traffic back then. Got to remember that was in the early 50s and middle 50s. So we'd go down to the corn stalk pile and get up on the corn stalk pile and play in the corn stalks. And we would play in those for hours. You could walk on them, and then once in a while they'd cave in, and you'd go up to your knees or up to your waist, have to pull each other out. And so that was a lot of fun, and now that took place year round. You could go down there all year round and get into corn stalks. But then there was also a lime pile at the other mill, and believe it or not, we used to go down and play on the lime pile. And we would climb on it. There would be big chunks of lime. We would throw them at each other, coming up and down, and that was not probably the right way to go. I don't believe to this recollection anybody really got lime in their eyes and had a problem with that, but we would do that. We lived by railroad tracks, and we would play on the tracks. We had plenty of open area. We had a creek, Middle Branch Nimishillen Creek run through Middle Branch there, and we'd go down there, and when we were old enough, we would go swimming and wade in there and try to catch tadpoles and what have you. And
Was it deep enough? It was deep enough to swim?
yes, there was a couple places. In fact, I don't remember who put it together, but there was a tire swing, and so we would swing out on that tire, and we had a Tarzan rope, and we would swing out on the rope and drop into the deep. Now, at that point, it might have been 4.5, 5 feet, definitely over our heads. We were, I would say, when we were doing those things, we were probably maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that era. Don't remember the little brother, my little brother Mark, or the girls coming down till later, but my older brother Jimmy and I, and then some of the neighbors that were about our age would congregate down there and do those things. And then as we got a little bit older, 6, 7, whatever, we had bicycles. So we would be riding them around the area, and we pretty well stayed within a couple blocks of the neighborhood. The school was across the street from us, so that afforded some riding that we could get in the parking lot over there. They had a big sidewalk, and also had a bus garage hill that we could go down, and we could ride the bikes on that. So, and I remember Cowboys and Indians. There was a vacant lot behind us, and we'd play Cowboys and Indians. So we had a lot of fun doing that. And then also along that same line was around the dinner table. There's 5 of us and my 2 parents, so 7 people. And well, back then you ate dinner a lot together, if not always, except if maybe there was exception when one of the parents were working or something. But that was always chaotic with that many kids, and Mom cooking the meals, and there'd be occasional, you knocked over a glass of milk or a glass of water, and my dad would explode because a lot of times it was knocked on his plate of food. So, and what was the second part of your?
Oh, just what did you and your family do for fun? So, like, if you did stuff with your parents, did you guys go, do things like that?
Yeah, we as far as that goes, we used to go, and this was a treat, but we'd go to Frank's Family Restaurant, and we'd have hamburgers and French fries, or once in a while we would go to a place called Roar's Pink Cottage over on Whipple Avenue, where back then there was no Belden Village, there was no Route 77, and we would go there on Sundays, in my recollection, and they had like a family-style buffet. And a lot of times my grandparents or aunts and uncles would tag along with that. And I don't remember a lot of cousins going, but I remember the aunts and uncle, grandparents, and the older ones that maybe only had a child or 2 and they were older than us. But that we do that, and and outdoor movies. We go to outdoor movie theaters, and that was always fun.
Like a drive-in?
Drive-in, right. Yeah.
I remember going to those when I was a kid, but they were on their way out by the time I was growing up.
Well, they were hot and heavy when we were growing up, and as we got a little bit older, we were allowed to go to the movies by ourselves. But that came close to probably being a young teenager, 12, 11, but we'd have to go as a group, and we couldn't go by ourselves. But as a family, we would do those things. And then there was a few vacations. We would go swimming, and there were some vacations in there that I remember a place called Shadow Lake Farm, and I believe I had some pictures that I found out too long ago, or for that matter, it could have been a while back now, but they were from the 50s, and they had horseback riding and canoeing and things, and we did get to go there one time, and that was a family vacation, just our family. I don't remember any aunts or uncles or whatever, so I think it was kind of a pretty typical growing up in that respect. But I do remember, because of our family having 5, my cousins live across the street, they were close in age, they had 4, there were a few other neighbors that had 2 or 3 here and there. There was always some activity, always some action and things going on. So.
Your cousins lived across the street?
One cousin family. My mom's brothers, maybe my mom's older brother and his kids and a wife and them lived right across the street, the Pappases. So,
okay. Oh. All right.
And once we got, and actually, when I think about it now, we got to playing around. They didn't move in until maybe the middle maybe the later 50s. They weren't there in the earlier 50s. Of course, I was a lot smaller then. But it almost became like the Little Rascals. But one thing about early childhood, we only had one TV, and it was black and white. It was like maybe a 14-inch. But we would watch Little Rascals a lot. So we would try to play out, and somebody would be Spanky, somebody would be Tubby, somebody would be, nobody could be Buckwheat. Or did we have somebody? Oh, I think we made my little brother Buckwheat. And we had a dog. We made our dog, we put a magic marker around his eye and made him Petey. But we used to play the Little Rascals, and then we would play the cowboy and Indian role. But when my mom started working, and by then we were probably, Jimmy and I were a little bit older, 12 and 13 or 10, 11. But anyway, we'd come home from school, and we would want to watch, if we weren't working, maybe the Little Rascals or Sky King or Lassie or something, right? Well, we had babysitter. Well, no, they were in charge. We'd have to watch American Bandstand.
From Philadelphia, it's time for America's favorite dance party, American Bandstand. And now, here's the star of our show, Dick Clark.
Bless you, Charlie.
And so
Thank
it would
you
go
very
to
much.
American Bandstand at 4 o'clock like clockwork. Every day that they babysat, we kind of got acclimated to understand, even though we were littler. And you know what? That would have been probably late 50s, early 60s. But music. So the twist, Chubby Checker, the different songs, the different dances. We knew them all back then, of course, Elvis Presley and all his stuff, because our older babysitters would insist on, and then sometimes their friends would come over, girlfriends, they would be watching our television, and we would be, pushed aside. It's like, get out of the way, little guys. So I just was thinking of that because that was really a time too that you'd fight back and forth about the television.
So, do you have a story about maybe like one of your parents, for each parent, like maybe something that your dad did once that was really funny, or something that your mom did, or doesn't have to be funny. I mean, it could be something that meant a lot to you, or anything that you could think of, or in particular, or both of them together, or
Well, I think definitely my dad, he worked a lot. So in growing up, my mom was always the one around for the hands-on stuff. But I remember my dad had a 37 Chevy, and it had running boards on it. And he used to, my brother and I, he would pick us up, and this had to have been middle 50s. So maybe I'm 5, he's 6, I'm 6, he's 7. He'd pick us up at the end of the driveway when he'd come home and let us stand on the running boards, and he would drive up our driveway, and we would think that was a big deal. And I do remember Dad doing that whenever we caught him. And he also was as tired as he used to be and worked long hours. If we were out in the yard playing with a baseball or and catching that or football, throwing it, he would take the time to play with us a little bit. He worked a lot of long hours and such, but he would do that. And then Mom had the dubious task of taking us school shopping for clothes. And those of us that were in school versus the little ones that were tagging along because there was nobody to watch or whatever at that point, why there's 5 of us, and we're in and out of these stores. I remember Robert Hall as one of them. and they had clothes racks. Well, my mom would be over working, trying to get my sisters or brother sized up, and I would be crawling around, or my little brother would be crawling around underneath the clothes racks, and we would be going in and out. When she went to call us and try to find us, we wouldn't say anything. We'd be quiet, and so she spent probably half of her shopping time looking for us, and then my little brother once in a while, or sister, or for that matter, whoever would then rat you out and say, "Hey, they're over here, they're over here." But my mom had that deal of doing that for us all the time. And then the mom was great about getting us off to school with a good breakfast. And she'd pack our lunch, and I remember she insisted, you had your oatmeal, or you had your scrambled eggs, or you had your whatever, but she'd make sure you ate. And then we walked to school, because we lived right across the street from our school. And she would make sure that we were had eaten well and were ready to go, and then of course got off to school. So I think both of them in that respect fond memories, that they took time with us as all they could, and Mom especially. And then one other item there as far as siblings and things to do, we all slept together in one bed in one bedroom. So at one point there were 5 kids in one bedroom in one bed. Well, when us boys started to get a little older, and so did the girls, then my mom and dad had to make a decision. And of course, they shipped us boys out, the older boys, and my brother and I went to then a renovated upstairs attic room, which became our bedroom. But at one point, all 5 of us, and we managed to sleep in that bed and get sleep. I don't know how that happened, but we were all in one bed. Well, and until that renovation was done, and that came about, I believe, in either 61 or 2, there was one bathroom. And so that was a challenge. Although, and this is what many people find, at least I know Kristen, Emily, Diana swear they would never take a shower in the basement, but there was a basement shower, and that was where we showered a lot, and it was acceptable. I mean, it was fine. Hot water, heat down there, you showered. I don't know. It wasn't the enclosed, fancy tile and all that stuff you have now, but that was a outlet for at least us boys, because we were older, versus having to wait to get a bath, because we didn't have a shower in our bathroom upstairs until that was renovated in the 60s. It was just a tub.
Yeah.
So any showering was done downstairs.
Yeah.
In the basement.
That was at my house. It was like that too. There was no shower upstairs. You had to go downstairs, and then run up through the house cold in a towel to your room. That's what it was like, even at my house. So So do you remember your grandparents at all? Did you meet all of them, or were they gone by the time?
My mom and dad's parents were deceased, but my dad's dad and mom were both living. My grandpa died, I believe, about 61, and I remember him, thin man, had a crippled arm that he had hurt in working on a railroad, kind of bent up in that, and that was his smoking hand. And he smoked, and I can remember he always would bring that cigarette up, and he smoked non-filters, and so he had a lot of, it seemed like, yellow stains on that one hand from smoking all those years. But he was a thin man, not too tall, but he was good to us kids. Didn't see him a lot, but he was good to us kids. He brought us home. He brought to the house, I should say, one time a puppy, and he was drunk, and he had it in his pocket, and he was playing with us kids there and talking. So it had to have been in the later 50s. We were all around there scurrying around when he came in. And I remember my dad was sleeping, because he used to take naps a lot when he came home, because he worked went to work at midnight, maybe sometimes didn't get home till 2 or 3 in the afternoon the next day. So he would take naps. Well, he was in there sleeping, and Grandpa had this puppy. Well, it was up to my dad and Mom, of course, whether we kept the puppy, and I can't remember where my mom was at the time. But my grandpa went into my dad's room, and it was dark. He was in there sleeping, and he took this puppy and he threw it out on the bed, and man, did my dad get mad. He yelled and screamed, and we thought, maybe he was going to get in a tussle with his own father. Well, here, Grandpa come out of there laughing, and he put the dog on the couch there with us to play with and left. And so we were feeding it bread and doing whatever, and he had already named it Tony after my uncle that was married to my dad's oldest sister. It was a Boston Terrier, and that was our first dog that we actually remember having. There was another one named Blackie, and he was out on a chain all the time, and he got loose when I was real little and never came back, and I don't know what happened to him. So Tony came along, but Grandpa brought him, and we ended up getting to keep him, so for that we were real happy about. And then he also was active in the diner that my mom and dad and my grandma and grandpa and aunt opened, called Jim's Diner. I believe it was named after my grandpa. But anyway, they had Easter egg hunts, and I'll never forget, kids in the neighborhood, my grandpa, some of the eggs had stars and they were marked, and you get a special, like you could take it in for a prize. And we were running around like chickens with our heads cut off looking for these eggs, and my grandpa was standing there talking to somebody. He says, "Hey, Mikey, find any eggs?" "Yeah, a few." "Find any with stars?" "No." He points over there near the railroad tracks. I go over and there's one with a star. So I don't know if he was hedging because I was his grandkid or what, but I took it in and then got a special prize or something for it. But I remember Grandpa from those kinds of experiences, and him and Grandma would visit. They didn't live too far away, pretty regular, and they also lived in a house in Greentown with no indoor plumbing. So I remember that. We would go up to visit, and if we had to go to the bathroom, especially in the winter, it was outside in this outhouse. And then Grandma, they both were smokers, but Grandma was she was quiet, and she was pretty gentle and laid back. So I remember her being that way, and she always would warn us kids, "I worry about you kids, I this, I that." But she lived it to be in her 70s, so I was in her later years. I was off to school and doing a lot of things that I wasn't paying much attention to her actually being at home there, because my dad built on an addition in the 60s for her after my grandpa died, so that she could be close. So, but they were kind people, and I don't think either one of them had much. I know the other thing about my grandpa is he was a bootlegger, and he sold booze during Depression, and that's how he kept things moving, I guess, or going. He was an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So do you have any favorite stories about your childhood in Middle Branch that might involve you or your siblings? I would imagine it'd be kind of hard not to, being that you had so many siblings. And
well, I remember my brothers and I, not so much a little brother, but my older brother. Back then, wrestling has just started up, big time wrestling, and they had Bobo Brazil. They had the Love Brothers. They had these guys they even had some midgets, I remember. They would go at it in the ring, and we were kind of intrigued, so we would try to emulate, and we would wrestle. Well, we had a mattress upstairs that we slept on, because in that area that you saw how renovated or how large it was, it was not remodeled for a time, and my brother, when we first moved up there, my two brothers and I had a bed that was a normal bed. Well, from wrestling and jumping up and down, we broke it down. So my dad and mom made us sleep on the mat, on the mattress. So we used to wrestle on it. So I remember wrestling a lot of times. We'd try to copy the guys that were on TV, and the walls around that upstairs at the time were of a material that it wasn't real. I think they called it Celotex. It wasn't real durable. Well, my brother and I were wrestling, and I threw him up in the air or something, but his butt went through the wall, made a great big hole. So we didn't know what to do. So we took a dresser, and we rolled a dresser in front of it. And so for quite a while, my mom and dad never knew that there was a big hole punched in there because the dresser was in front of it. But I remember wrestling and stuff with my brothers, plus just stuff that you'd do again. Oh, we had a fort that we built. And my sisters kind of played off to themselves, plus they would play with girls. So most of the dynamics and the interaction was done with the brothers or the neighborhood boys and that. But we had a fort we built. And this fort was pretty neat. It not only had a downstairs, but you could go up through a trap door, and you would go up to the second floor, and then the second floor walls were only halfway up, and then you could look out and it had a roof on it and everything. Well, we played in that, and neighbors played in that for, a lot of years. But we used to have, and as dumb as it was, but we did it until my brother got shot between the eyes, is BB gun fights. Because we would play cowboys and Indians, and we would shoot at each other with BB guns. Well, my brother got hit right between the eyes, and that stopped that because we thought we would really, done him in.
Oh my God, I shot my eye out.
But we would do that, and then we would ice skate in the pond. We would ice skate down at the creek. We would sled ride. The school bus garage was close to us, and it had a nice hill going down where the buses parked. Well, the buses would pack that snow down, it would become ice, so that was a blistering fast hill. So we would go down there, and we would race, and we would try to take each other out with wrecks and everything. But we also had a unique thing. I can't remember if one of my brothers started this or my neighbors, cousins, or whoever. But cardboard that came from, say, an appliance, stove, refrigerator, whatever. The cardboard had wax on it, and it was always usually pretty thick. Well, we would take that cardboard down to the hills that were adjacent to the creek and the stream, and we would ride that cardboard down there flying. And the funny part about it is when you got to the end, why, the stream was there, so you would either go into the stream, or if it would stop too quick, it would shoot you off, and then you were in the creek.
The cardboard would be behind.
Oh yeah, cardboard would remain back. But we would do that, on a regular basis. But I do remember, definitely in the summer, a lot of times on the weekends, even in the fall and winter, you'd go out in the morning, and you might come home for a bite to eat, but you'd stay out all day. And then you'd come back, and I remember coming home and my pants were frozen. You'd take them off, and they would stand up, and because you either got wet from the snow, you got wet from the falling in the pond, ice skating the stream, and so, you were out. Now, some of that time might have been spent, maybe stopped at a neighbor's house, and you went in there for a little bit, a friend and all that, but there were all different kinds and groups of kids and ethnic folks that it was a fun place.
So when you were younger, did you have a clear idea of what you wanted to be when you grew up, or were you just kind of taking things as it came, or?
No.
You didn't have a dream of being an astronaut or anything like that?
Once in a while I would think of something like that. I know I was kind of intrigued with stars and astronomy, but that fizzled. It took a lot of science and math, and as I got older, I knew I didn't want to pursue, something like that. But I think as I got a little bit older and started playing sports, I think sports was kind of something that was out there that I thought, geez, hey, I'd like to be baseball probably was the first thing, because back then they didn't have all the midget and smaller football things that they got going now. Baseball, you started, Little League was 9 years old. Prior to that, it was just pickup games, and you would play in the neighborhood, which is something else we did in the summer months. A lot of baseball, a lot of pickup football, and some basketball too. We had a hoop there. We did have one in the garage. We would be kind of a focal point for a rallying point for basketball. So No, not really a serious, but there was just a bunch of scattershot. I think whatever hit my fancy, that month was maybe what I wanted to be. Yeah, so.
Tell me, do you have any favorite stories from your teen and young adult years, which, roughly ages 14 to 22, which would have been high school and maybe even some college in that area? Do you have any particular funny stories you can remember about those times?
Well, from 9 years old on, my brother and I started working in my mom and dad and grandparents' diner. So we washed dishes, and I remember, this would have been a fun thing, but I remember begrudging having to get up early and be up there to wash dishes. I think the place opened at 6. We'd have to be up there early, 5:30, whatever, to get things ready and all that. And then as the customers start coming in, wash the dirty dishes, dry, because back then there was no dishwashers. At least our diner didn't have one. But in that time window there, why, as time progressed, a lot of guys around Middle Branch hung around the diner, because Middle Branch was a post office, a general store, the diner, a gas station, and a bunch of houses, 2 mills, and a school. So it was not unincorporated. It was a cluster of I don't know how many hundred people, group of houses in the area, but then it was surrounded by farms. So, and then the other thing it was, I'm not sure if it was in Middle Branch either. It might have been just right outside of the signs anyway, was the Diamond Portland Smith, which was a major employer of the area, plus the railroad. There was a railroad tracks that ran through. But we grew up on Depot Street, and there was a train depot. So when we were little, to backtrack in that probably that 5 to 7, 5 to 10 range even, I'll say even 10. We used to hang around over to Depot a lot. We had a couple neat depot masters, and we would watch them teletype and do stuff with the trains. We would also watch the hobos in the summertime in the boxcars.
Oh, well, I'll go out to meet her when she comes. When she comes. Oh, well, I'll go out to meet her when she comes. When she comes.
And we would also get candy from the caboose guys that used to throw out the candy, and they had cabooses back then. And then the early years, there were steam engines. We were the second house in from the railroad track, so we grew accustomed to train noise, to that environment, and it was just a way of life. And you'd play on the tracks too. Because you'd find iron balls that formed that we could use in slingshots later. When we got older, we found out that them things really would zoom. Instead of trying to get a rock that's not uniform shaped, you get them iron balls, man. You take them puppies and you can sling them a long way.
Where did the iron balls come from?
The train cars that they were hauling iron ore in up the Diamond or someplace. But those kinds of things made up Middle Branch. In Middle Branch, I don't know when it was founded, but the houses were mostly older homes, and the diner that my folks had was so old that it had hitching post in front of it, where they used to hitch horses and whatever up during stagecoach times. But fast forwarding then from starting at 9 years old, washing dishes and all that stuff, as we progressed through, why we used to hang around with the older guys that had cars and kind of look up to them. They had their cigarettes rolled up in their T-shirts and didn't do any smoking. Took some chewing tobacco once in a while from my dad's place, but I got sick on it, me and my buddy, so we quit doing that because we swallowed the juice and you weren't supposed to, but didn't do any. Oh, I'll take that back. We tried to get some cigarette butts. We did out of my mom and dad's, because they both smoked, ashtray a time or two and smoked them in the gondola cars. And we used to get up in them and play. But they also made us sick. But that said, to get up then and move on to teen, was playing some sports and stuff, but also hanging with the guys around the neighborhood, cars. My one good friend worked at a gas station, so he kind of got me interested in what working on a car. I mean, I didn't do a lot. I watched the older guys talk about and beef up and change their cars around and stuff. And then as my brother and I were older, in '65 when he turned 16, him and I took this money that my dad insisted we save 50% of what they paid us every week towards something. Well, in 1965, we were old enough to pay cash for a 62 Chevy Super Sport. Well, then we got a car, and then my brother was old enough to drive, so that changed the dynamics because now you were mobile. Prior to that, we had a couple of older guys in the neighborhood that we would catch rides with to drive-in movie theaters, or the roller rink was big back then, Shawley's Rollatorium over in Louisville. And you'd catch a ride over there, or you'd catch a ride to one of the diners. They were actually drive-in places like the Avalon, the Big Sis, and a lot of the older guys, and well, once my brother and I were old enough then to have a car, you'd go down there and sit, and you'd watch people circle through, and it was a constant circle of cars, guys showing off their cars, showing off their girls, showing off whatever, and you would go back and forth between one or two of these drive-ins that were close together. And so you'd spent time down there, especially on weekends when school was out. Didn't go down much during school, but that was something that went on. And then, I don't know, your typical, I think you go to school activities, football games, basketball games. I played football, so my participation during those years was I was there playing. And then got older, 18, you started, of course, there was dating going on and hang with the guy kind of thing. But then you started going to the bars, having a few beers, because back then they had 3-2 beer. And we had to go out of Middle Branch, out of Plain Township, because it was dry. There were no bars or any establishments. So we would migrate either east of Plain Township, Louisville direction, or over in Jackson Township, North Canton. Well, North Canton was dry too. So you'd go over into Jackson. But that also said then you started to go to some of the places where you could meet girls, where girls were at, and some of the what they called dance bars, where they had live bands and that stuff. So you spent time doing that. And I had a few cousins that were older. One was in the service. When he came back, he had enough money and he bought a Roadrunner. And so to hang with him, having a 383 4-speed orange, flaming orange Roadrunner, you were kind of cool doing that. So you kind of hung there and did that thing. Anybody that had a hot car, and our car was considered a nice car too, but it was a convertible also, you had to hang with that group. And so there was that. And then I worked a lot. I was taught from an early age, but I really got to say from my mom and dad both, and my dad probably more, that they instilled in us that it didn't hurt to work. And they didn't deprive us and not let us participate in anything we wanted to in school. They just, if we weren't going to do that and extracurricular activities, then the diner was there that we needed to help with the family business, and we also got money. So I always had some money in my pocket to do stuff which I didn't have to sponge off my mom and dad, because there were 5 of us, and honestly, even though my mom and dad did both work in their careers, not so much my mom until we were a little older, but my dad, long hours, why, they wouldn't have had the money just to hand you if you wanted to go here, there, and everywhere. But you ask about stories too. One of my favorite with my dad too is, I'll never forget, one of my best buddies, he had a really nice house and used to go stay overnight there once in a while, and I'd think I was in a hotel. I mean, he had an older brother, so there were just the 2 of them. Now, mind you, I had younger brothers and sisters that you had to watch. If you went in and sat on a couch or one of our chairs, you might sit in a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or you might sit on some pizza, or you might sit in some food, because little brothers and sisters were just eating away in there. And so that was always something you had to watch for. And their house was spick and span, and they had a nice car, and his dad and mom had, I think at that point, they were had more money than most. But I'd go stay overnight with him. Well, I'll never forget one time after a baseball game, he played on our baseball team, and we were up at the diner getting treats because we won. And that's one thing my dad used to do. He used to bring us up to the diner, and we'd have milkshakes if we won. And everybody on the team, the bat boy and whatever, you'd have milkshakes. And the diner would pay for them. Well, my best friend said, hey, you want to go to the fair? Stark County Fair was going on. And I said, sure. Well, I didn't happen to have a lot of money right there at the time, so I asked my dad if I could have some money to go to the fair. Well, my pop gave me $5. I was probably 11, couldn't have been more than 12 because Little League you had to get out after 12. So I'd have been about 61 or 62 at the latest. That was a pretty good amount of money, $5 back then. Well, I go with my friend who's got all this money and everything. We get there, his mom and dad give him $2. And I was just so proud. I had enough money, man. I was like a Benny Rooster. I was buying him stuff. To this day, I'll never forget because I had twice as much money as he did. And I was like, wow. So, those are the kind of things that kind of stick out. But then on, through in teenage, and I think typical stuff. And again, music, you started paying attention to records, and you started noticing that the bars that had the live bands and the bars that played music, that's where a lot of the girls hung out. So, now you could go to your neighborhood bar, which did a lot of that too, where you'd sit there and you'd slam down a few beers with your buddies, and a lot of them smoked. I didn't smoke. I wasn't a smoker. They smoked, so you hung with them. They had them bowling machines back then. And so you bowled or you played pool. Colonial 77 lanes that they just tore down recently. 50-some years it was around. Yep. Well, that was a spot that was one of the first bowling alleys that started having live bands in their lounge. Mm-hmm. Well, that was a place to go. So you would hear word so-and-so was playing. You migrated, you kind of followed around and got into the different band scenes. And then me, when I got out of high school, and all through high school I worked too, junior high and high school. And once the diner was let go, I still had to drive to work. By that I mean the will to work, because I knew you worked, you made money, and you made money, you could buy stuff. And my brother and I both worked at the fiberglass factory right down the road from us. And man, I know when I was, I'd have been a sophomore, about 64, 65, 6. I was getting $1.60 an hour. Well, my brother, Glenwood, would split shift. And so my brother and I would go 7:30, 11:30. After football season, we were out at noon. So we would go, and at 1 o'clock, we would go to work at the fiberglass factory. We'd work a shift, like till 7 or 8. And man, we were making clear now, $60, $50, $70 a week, clear money. Well, wow, we were like, so you were buying whatever you needed and treating your buddies when you could. You had a girlfriend, you could take her out and buy her meals and not have to, sponge from your parents, and keep gas in your car, buy your tires. So all that was pretty neat, and you saw what you work, you get a paycheck, you could see what it could do. So that was a good, I think, solid upbringing, and my mom and dad instilled. And again, they never forced us to work, but they did encourage us to participate if we weren't going to take extra activities in school. And our grades, they wanted us to make sure our grades were sufficient. They didn't always have to be A's, but get your homework and get your stuff done too, because if the work was interfering with that, then that would be nixed. So then when I decided to go to college, then that was just, I needed to study, plus I needed to work. So I was occupied there,
When you went to college, did you know what you wanted to do going in, or you just wanted to get a degree so that you could move?
Well, my mom and dad always encouraged us and said that if we wanted to go, they never had a chance, never had the money. If you wanted to go, they were behind you. My oldest brother went off to war in Vietnam, and he chose that route. First he started in at Timkins, and then about 6 months later, the war was calling people up, drafting, whatever. So he went in the service. My lottery number came up real high, and I had worked in plants and factories. Like I said, the fiberglass factory. I got a good job at the Diamond Portland that summer before college, making good money. But I kind of knew I didn't want to be a factory worker. I kind of got that. Now, construction was kind of something that caught my eye, but construction was, and I got a feel of it, was too inconsistent with weather related and all that. You went like guns and blazing guns for 6 months, but then around here, if you stayed, what are you going to do in the winter? Unless you're an inside, outside person, what are you going to do? So I like being outside, and I knew that would be appealing, but as far as college, I had some friends that were gone, but I also realized that even back then, continuing education would help you, open some doors. Didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went in school. I was a business major. Well, business at what? Well, I took business courses and some general electives, but then I kind of got to looking at teaching and school. Summers off kind of seemed appealing. I like sports, so I thought, maybe coaching would be something that I would be fairly good at to supplement. And then one last thing that took place, and I'll never forget this, what might have been a real tipping point too, was I had a freshman guidance counselor. And when you're picking out your classes and things to go on into high school, you meet with a counselor. And I'll never forget, he told my parents, he's not college material. He needs to go a different direction, which would have meant VOED or some other kind of training. Well, my grades were such that I didn't really give school a serious, chance. I mean, I didn't get bad grades most of the time, but I didn't get also the honor roll stuff. I was okay with something in the middle, which mediocre, that probably isn't the best way to try to be. In fact, it isn't, but that was okay with me. I was making the grade C and above, and I was eligible for sports, and I didn't have to be an honor student. I didn't have to be, a scholar. So, and I'll never forget that guidance counselor said he's not college material. Well, that also stuck in this guy's mind, and from a freshman till senior, and I thought, wait a minute. And then as I got going and I decided I was going to be a school teacher, I went back to the junior high where he was at to do my student teaching my sophomore year, and his jaw hit the floor when I walked in, and he says, "What are you doing here, Mr. Stevens?" I said, "I'm going to be a teacher." Bow. Well, I fixed his goat.
So how did you come to be at Clay's Park? Did you just see an ad in the paper that there was an opening there, or you knew people who went there? You decided it would be nice to work, or?
My first year at Jackson High School was in 73-74 school year. And I said to myself, I had switched majors about my sophomore year and decided I had LM courses, and I decided I didn't want to be a business major. So I switched majors. I lost some courses switching that wouldn't apply to an education degree. So I had some making up to do. So I was going summers and everything. Well, when I landed a job at Jackson, I had decided in the spring, I'm not doing anything, man. I'm taking the summer off. I'm going to chill, because paychecks ran all summer. And I'll never forget Tom McKee, the physics teacher. He'd come up to me, and they used to call me Catman, Cat Stevens and Stevie. And he says, "Hey, Stevie, what are you doing this summer?" I said, "I'm going to sit under a tree. I'm going to drink beer and enjoy myself and whatever." I probably add a little bit more to that, but I won't put it in there for family reasons. But he said, "Hey, how would you like to do all that and make money?" And I said, "What, sit under a tree, drink beer, and make money?" I said, "More money," and he said, "More money per month than you do teaching." And I go, "There's not such a job out there." Well, he did, the way he described it was a little misleading, but his point was he had the waterfront director's job at Clay's. Tom was also a swim coach for Jackson. I think that was a good, probably, criteria for getting him in over at Clay's, plus his supervisory experience with young people being a teacher and his training. Well, he says, "Look, I'm going to go to grad school." And he says, "I got this job at a place called Clay's Park, and I'm over the lifeguards." And he said, "And I'll tell you what, it's a good job. It's good, clean atmosphere." He said, "I think you ought to interview. You'd be good for it. It'd be great." And I said, "Tom, I don't have any swimming credentials." I said, "I can barely swim." He goes, No. Your teaching background, and that will lend itself, that's what, you need to be a supervisor and an overseer." And he said, "You'll have a head lifeguard that will have all the detail, have all the water criteria. All you need to do is oversee." Oh, sounds good. Never heard of Clay's Park, by the way. So he says, "Hey, I'll tell them about you." So I get an interview. And I'll never forget, it was in it was in the house where John and Peggy live. John had come up, and there was a fire going. And I interviewed with Mr. Clay, and then I also interviewed with your grandpa. And I was more nervous for some reason with your grandpa than I was with John O. And I don't know why to this day, but they were both very nice, and they both commanded, you don't joke around, this is serious, and so on, very, very professional. But I was selected. So I started out, and the rest is history.
So the interview took place at a fire, you said? Like they had a fire out?
Mr. Clay had a fire in his fireplace
Oh, okay.
at the, I call it the plantation house.
The brick house.
Brick house. And I'll never forget because it was nice and warm, and he was sitting in there, and he might have been puffing on his pipe. Now, when I interviewed then, because I had two,
Yeah.
when I interviewed them with your grandpa, that was up at his place.
Across the street.
And that was, honestly, it wasn't as a that's probably what a little more the intimidation was. It wasn't quite as a laid back, like a fire and a comfortable chair kind of thing. It was pretty much, I believe, if they have a library or an office setting, it was more of a business atmosphere kind of thing. And that might have been the part that kind of intimidated me a little bit. But no, I got the job, and geez, I said, this is it. I mean, my first year there, I thought, I kept having to pinch myself.
Yeah.
I'm getting paid to do this. I mean, I'm getting paid. And I used to kid them and say if they could ever afford someone full time after that first year, because they told me that they would like to have me back. So I was kind of set for the next year.
Yeah.
But
So
it was
would that have been 75, 76?
it would have been in 74, 75 then, because I think my first year there was 73 summer.
Okay.
So it would have been 74 summer, and then it went on then, I believe, 5 seasons or 6, something like that, and then I ended up in the full-time.
Because I think my dad started working their summers being a teacher also, that he started there 75, 76, working his summers out there.
And, you know, I remember a lot of the people, but not, because I was only a seasonal person, I didn't hang around much. I mean, once my job was done there, and I didn't hang around much, came back and hung with my own group and all that stuff. But on in, I think then maybe after the second or third year, as I got to know some of the people up at the gate were repeaters, like your father and the Roaches and the Fudges and old Ernie Bloomfield, those people. Then I started to have more dialogue. Your Uncle Rick, Mike, you know, I started to get more dialogue with those guys too, and some of the lifeguards that were older. Because when I started, Rob Lynn was a head lifeguard. Rob was only a year younger than I, but there were, I think, maybe 6 or 7 college-age guards, and then a lot of high school are getting ready to go into college. And campers. A lot of them were coming out of the campground. And Massillon, Washington had a swim team back then that furnished quite a few lifeguard candidates too, because they had already taken life-saving and that stuff, so they were already certified and all that. But yeah, that, I mean, great job. I mean, to supplement teaching, it was, and then I even got rolled into the Yankee Peddler scenario too, where, hey, you want to make some extra money, and again, supplemented the income.
Which continues to this day. The
Well,
Yankee Peddler
true,
stuff.
true. Well,
Bobby
voila,
Apple and everybody.
40 some years later, and I'm still affiliated and on the surface with them. So yeah.
Yeah. So that actually kind of dovetails into the next question: is how did you meet Diana? Which I know the answer to that, but you know, you met Diana and all them, and got married eventually, and you can go forward with that.
Well, met Diana at Clay's, and her and her sister Karen and her best friend Donna came down swimming. I guess Diana's family, I learned this, of course, along the way after I met her family. They used to come down in the summers off and on in would have been probably the late 60s and early 70s when she was a teenager, camping and meet relatives from Pennsylvania and whatnot. Well, her and her girlfriend Donna and Karen decided they were going to come down here the week that they were all on vacation, which would have been in that year 75 summer. And I, after 3 or 4 summers had gotten a pretty good idea of the regulars that were there at the park. The Hilberts, the Roushes with their families and their kids, and the Harrises from the campground, and a lot of those people. But I kind of got to know pretty regularly the daily people that would come in, the swimming people, on a regular basis. Now, weekends, there would be a lot of different people because people were off work. But through the week, family memberships and whatnot, so I kind of got to know the dynamics of the beach. Well, that one week, when Diana and her sister and Donna showed up, I saw 3 young ladies that I hadn't seen before, and I specifically remember Diana having a yellow 2-piece bathing suit, and I said, whoa, I got to meet this girl. And she wasn't real friendly at first when I went up. In fact, all week that they came down, I spent more time talking to her sister Karen than I did Diana, which I was really trying to get to Diana, but Karen was the more social one, and very friendly and nice and cute and all that. But I think Donna had a boyfriend, and at the time I think Diana did too. But there I am thinking, hey, you know, as we talked and stuff, I finally worked up enough, I guess, courage at the end of the week to ask her if she wanted to go out. Now, her and I don't remember this the same because I asked her about this, but I thought she blew me off. But she said yes. So I did have a date with her, and we went to Blossom Music. She reminded me. This is how your mind, you know, leaves you. And we went to see the Carpenters.
Why do birds suddenly appear every time you are near? Just like me, they long to be close to you.
And what I do remember about that is I took a 6-pack of Michelob beer and a bottle of Lanzer wine, because back then you could take in booze. You didn't have to. You could take it in right there in the containers, whatever. And she never wanted anything to drink, so I never touched the beer, and that was torture. So it was like, so we saw the Carpenters. I took her home. I got a good night kiss that, when I think back, was like kissing your brother. But I left and I drank my 6-pack on the way.
Where were you living at the time? When
At home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, this
I was.
okay. In your
Yeah, because
20s.
you know, all through that, because I commuted to Kent. I didn't have the money to stay on campus. And, I mean, I spent time up there with some friends and that stuff, but I commuted my school because I worked all the time and needed to work. And I had, I guess, for lack of better, my cluster of friends and interests were down here in Starr County and not up in Kent. So I didn't bother to partake in a lot of that college life and fraternity stuff and all that. That was my choice. And I worked, and again I worked, and that kind of limited me too. But yeah, I was living at home. The rent was right. I was getting 3 meals and getting my laundry done, and only paying $50 a month or whatever it was to mom and dad. So, but when I met Diana, then I was traveling back and forth to date her. So she was spending my money very well on the weekends when I go up to see her and then come back. We'd go out to eat and have steaks and have a few drinks, and I would spend a whole week's pay in 2 days or 2 nights with her. that was a challenge.
So the next question would be to describe your wedding day and your honeymoon.
My wedding day was exciting. I had my 2 brothers, my 1 cousin. I don't remember who the other party was. It was the best man and groomsmen and all that. But it was up in Cleveland, and we were married in a Methodist church, and then we had a reception at a Slovenian hall. I do remember her daddy getting pretty peeled at the reception, But my family came up. We stayed in a hotel. We had the rehearsal dinner that night, and then of course the next day the wedding, and then the next day we did come over to Diana's mom and dad's to open presents, because we didn't take a honeymoon, per honeymoon. We went somewhere that night, but it was a great day. I think the weather cooperated. Also, it was in the summer months, July. So, and Diana, she is to this day just a lovely bride, and yeah, we had a lot of fun.
I remember hearing a story about her dad in his tuxedo. What was that about her dad? He
slept in it.
Yeah, or like he paid so much money for
That
it
he
that
said
he wore it.
and I believe he had it on the
lawn.
next. I believe he had it on the next day when we got over there, maybe after at noon. He was still in it. Yeah, Robert. He would do off the wall things like that in a very laid back, whatever way. But
He's gonna get his money's worth out of that tuxedo.
correct.
The thing I heard was mowing grass in it.
He might have been. He might have been, Pat. But I know. Yeah, it was just a great day. And Diane and I had picked out an apartment, and so we had. Oh no! I'm ahead of that. We had bought her uncle's camper, a 20-footer, and we set up in the pines at Clays Park.
Oh yeah.
So that was our honeymoon.
Oh, just for the honey. This wasn't permanent lodging. This was your honeymoon.
Well, now that I think back, I'm going to label it as our honeymoon. I doubt like heck if she thinks it was much of a honeymoon, but we were not in an apartment. We were in at a resort, for a couple months. So when you look at it that way, we were at the rest of July and all of August. So we'll say a better part of a couple months, 6 weeks, and yeah. Then by then we had moved in during this, I think, first few weeks or so of September, and we moved into a new building up there in Cedarwood, and that was our first apartment, which was a brand new building.
Where's Cedarwood?
It's down in the valley up off of Merriman Road.
Oh, okay.
Up near Stan Hewitt and that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Nice
So
area.
That's
yeah.
where the apartment.
Weather Vane, they call it Weather Vane Theater and all that. Well, I somehow, because I was one of the younger teachers, was asked to be a high school ski club advisor at Jackson. They needed a male and they needed a female. Well, it was kind of a natural, because it had to have been, because I remember going home from up there when Diana and I first got married, and we were living up in Cedarwood. So I said, sure, I'll take it. I didn't have to always ride the bus up. I could drive up, go from Brandywine right home. And I didn't know how to ski. I said, well, you don't have to know how to ski. Here again, supervisor, just oversee the kids, make sure they stay in proper form and act and all that. Okay. Well, not knowing how to ski, I got on the tow rope at first to go up the beginner hill. And I tried to stay away from the kids so they wouldn't make fun of me. Well, the tow rope is something that tows you up, and I've never been on skis, so I'm going along, and no one told me you're supposed to keep your feet together and kind of control yourself. I end up starting to do a split, and I'm splitting wider and wider. Then I fall. So I'm still holding on to the rope. So the rope's dragging me up the hill. My skis are bending backwards. I'm in a pretzel form, and I'm in excruciating pain. So I let go of the rope. Well, that was fine. I lost my poles that you help yourself with. So I get up. Even though it was a small kiddie hill, you're on a hill. So I'm standing up, and I'm starting to go backwards, and I can't stop. So this is another what do you do moment. So I just dropped to the ground. Well, as time progressed, I got a little bit better on the kiddie slope that night. So the next time, the kids are asking me, hey, Coach, or Mr. Stevens, yada, yada, when are you going to come on the ski slopes? We never see you. I said, well, I better, show them here that I can at least get on the slope. So I'm on the ski lift, and we go up, and again, no experience on being on a lift. Okay, right up the lift, get off, right? Well, you got these things that are 5.5, 6 feet tall, and they're sticking on the end of your feet. Well, nobody ever told me that you got to watch so you don't put the points in the ground and you go like this. So I'm on there and I'm ready to get off, and instead of flattening them out, my points go in the ground and whack. And the ski thing goes over my head and it's circling. The next people get off. We got a pile up going on, and then they have to stop the slopes because I got everything jammed up. And that was quite embarrassing because I will tell you that those little skinny things extended out on your feet, you can be athletic and you can be versatile and all that stuff, but you got to know how to use them. And that was my ski chair experience. And then I went flying down the hill and was out of control there too. I think that's the one and only time.
Yeah.
So spent the rest of the time in the pub.
So what would you say is the quality that you love most about Diana?
Well, that's an interesting question because there's several, but I really think this is a tribute to her. I love it and I don't like it. It's her blunt and brute, if that's the right word to use, total honesty. And we've had discussions about that before, and of course she knows how I feel, and I get where she's coming from too. But and if Diana buys into something, she's all in, and that's a great character to have for anybody. She'll give it 100%, and if you need to go to battle in something and she's behind you, she's behind you. So that's a great quality. She's really a kind and considerate person. She really is.
So tell me, I want to go to the kids now, Kristen and Emily. Do you have any stories about when they were little? Some of your favorite stories about when they were little, things that they did, etc.
Emily?
I want it. My nose is coming down again.
Your nose is coming down again.
Bad trouble when that nose starts
Oh,
coming down.
cute. That'll look great on tape. Wipe it down. Don't stretch it out like a rubber band. Emily would be playing in the bathtub. She would say, Emily's swimming, Emily's swimming. And she was little. Oh, yeah, you're swimming. And then as she got older, Kristen came along. Emily would protect Kristen, but yet she would always want to be the older person in charge. And I would watch. I know one time particular upstairs, in which is Kristen's bedroom now, was a playroom, and they were in there around a table, and I was filming them, and Emily was setting the table. Well, Kristen would come along and take the stuff and put it in a different arrangement. Well, Emily finally got pissed about that and kind of shoved her aside. I didn't step in. I just let it go on, and basically used her size and stuff to bully pulpit and shove Kristen out of the way, and then put them down like she wanted them.
That's something? No. No. She's trying to mess this up. Come on, Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
That's a hot frying pan, isn't it? You better tell your sister. You better tell Kristen that that's a hot pan. You had biscotti in there, didn't you? Well, Kristen was crushed and all that, but then she finally ended up getting back up and then sitting down and taking her own space, if you will. But they used to interact together and I would be off to the side listening, and it was kind of funny how Big Sister would take control and want to lead around.
Yeah, you can play. Go ahead and play. Placements will help me. I never really know. Place your puffer. Half lemon, cozy.
I know the sled riding video we have of Emily come smoking down the hill and throwing her tantrum like that. But I also, there's one where Kristen's on a bicycle and she's going down and she's going, Daddy, watch me. And she's one of her first rides and she's going down the hill, not on the driveway, but in the grass. And I'm not sure at the bottom of the hill whether she wipes out or not. I don't think she does, but then here she is pushing it back up the hill on her own. And she's so proud of that accomplishment. But that, and then I remember when they first, each one of them got on the bus, and to watch them go down the driveway together and holding hands, come up the driveway together, holding hands. Now Emily first by herself that was like you're letting your kids in somebody else's control. That was pretty tough. And yet she come home from school, jumped off that bus and was safe. Well, then 2 years later, here comes Kristen, and then Emily's showing her the ropes. But when they were little, they played, they watched videos, they animated and did their thing, and they had their favorites. We have one picture, and I believe it's a still picture, where they're asleep on the couch, and they're both kind of, you know, in their little jammies and stuff, and I think one of their bare legs was showing. But those kind of moments where when they were not so energetic and running around like crazy, it just caught my heart that I would look and say, wow, you know, look at those two little angels. Boing, you know, as soon as they woke up, that ended. But Kristen was emotional. She used to, and Diana remembers this, but she used to, like if Diana would tell her no on something, she'd be crawling around and try to get something off of one of these stands. Or Diana would say, no, no. Well, after a few no's, she'd start crying. Where Emily, she would just blow you off and do her thing. And I do recall also coaching them and how much fun it was, even though it wasn't fun for them, how much fun it was to watch them progress in sports and then get mad at me because I would yell louder at them than I would the other kids, or I would be harder on them than I would the other kids. So they, you know, they did their thing. You know, was proud to watch them, and they both played sports through junior high, and then decided that wasn't their cup of tea, which is fine. So I guess just in general being around, and unfortunately I was working a lot when they were real little. So Diana had the bulk of the raising, and I would be kind of in and out and hit and miss. And sometimes when I would come home, I would pick up some of these things, and I was intrigued that they bring up every now and then now about some of that coaching stuff, and I took the time out to do some things with them because I didn't think I did it enough. And we would play catch in the backyard, we would do some things. So that was a lot of fond, and still is, time and memory. So, because I felt I'm providing, and Diana and I are providing a safe, warm environment, and there they were. And a lot of times too with the dogs, because we had dogs when they were growing up, and some of the interaction they would do with the dogs was funny too. Just like baby Avery's doing now, like Hunter did, like Maddie did. I mean, animals mixed in there was a hoot.
Watch this, Dad.
So what would you say was the hardest part about raising children? Was there anything that you found difficult about it that sticks in your mind, like, wow, that was really tough? You know.
Yeah, saying no. And when they when they would be troubled, and still to this day, because they'll always be my girls. But any of us to this day, family, when we're having problems that we can't necessarily do something about because it's not in your control, yet it's eating away at and bothering. And, you know, from the time you're little and you want to be accepted, you want to have friends, you want to be accepted for who you are, you don't want to be made fun of, and so on and so on. Watching them get hurt, but knowing full well that they would recover, maybe from time to time being too lenient in that, and definitely not being on the same page with Diana, where I would say maybe no to one of them. Well, they go in there and work their mother, and their mother would go, oh, well, yeah, that's okay, or vice versa. And so the inconsistency there was not fair to them either, but that's something that you need to maintain. And I don't think that we did a bad job, but I don't think we did a really good job there.
Mm-hmm. Conversely, what would you say was probably the easiest thing?
Well, I think to love them.
Mm-hmm.
I think to just love them, and I think convincing them too, back to the difficult, to just be yourself and don't worry about what other people think. As life experiences has taught me, but it took a long time, to not worry about what everybody else thinks. If you're okay with yourself, then you're okay. And you can then in turn move on from there, but you gotta like yourself first. And I think, again, sharing with them and trying to give them whatever I could was easy. Mm-hmm. And allowing them some freedom. They're always going to be your little girls. They're always going to be your kids. So, they both have made some choices that I wasn't exactly pleased with, but as their father, I made some choices that I wasn't exactly pleased with either. So, I think that part about just loving them and having them around was just kind of like this is the way it should be.
So what would you say was the thing in your life that made you the happiest or the proudest? Like an accomplishment or something that happened in your life that you're like, wow, I did this, or this was my...
Well, not necessarily in this order, but I was the first that I'm in my immediate family to go to college. I don't think my brother Jimmy started right out. He went back and did some, but I'm the only one to have received a degree. So graduating from college was an accomplishment for me that I'm proud of. Definitely a proud moment was marrying Diana, and definitely a proud moments, plural, were having Kristen and Emily, and all the proud moments that they brought to us were, just great. And I think along the way there probably were some other things that would have been, but I think those kind of sum up most of it, or at least the most important ones.
Sure.
I had some sports accomplishments, but that's what it was, and
yeah. What would you say is your favorite place in the world to vacation? Like if you wanted to go somewhere, if you had any money was no object, like where would you want to go that you probably always wanted to go maybe?
I would like to, because my mom is half Greek, I would like to possibly visit Greece to maybe be able to look up some of the ancestry of relatives and so on. I have a couple of letters that my grandfather had either received or written, but they're all in Greek.
Yeah.
and my mama had them and give them to me. That would be one thing. And Diana has been to Hawaii. I haven't. Well, that's one place we are going to go. I've not been out west a whole lot to see the rest of our great country. So there's some places there that I'd like to try to get to see. But if I had unlimited resources, I think probably some of the ancient, older civilizations, and I mentioned Greece, but hey, some of the old cities in Spain, and I'm not necessarily interested in the Middle East. Definitely problems and all, but a lot of people, I mean, yeah, Jerusalem would be a magical place to see, and Israel and all the area perhaps where Christ traveled and that, but I would have to say, and I will say too, probably Alaska. That would be an interesting, I think, place to see, and Europe. So, oh, I don't know how I could miss this, because I said I almost talked the kids into going Australia, the land down under.
Down under. That'd be interesting.
So that's quite a to-do list there.
That's about as far away as you
you
can
need
get,
you need money to do that.
Yeah. So what's do you have a favorite hobby? Like what your favorite hobby is that you like to do nowadays?
You know, I've played golf for a lot of years. I like to play golf. I think I was more into it in my early years, but I didn't have the time. Now that I have the time and I have the money, because golf's not a cheap sport, I enjoy golf, and I'm seeing, I think, Hunter's interest in Madeline, and that intrigues me to say, look, you know, that's something maybe to get these guys involved in that they could do the rest of their life like their papa's doing it now at 67, and you can continue. So I would say, as far as that hobby would be, golf would be in there, but I really like working around the property. Even though I get bogged down from time to time, or I physically do stupid stuff like cut these fingers off and that, I like to see the development and what has transpired in the time I've been here, hoping that if a family member don't take it over, that whoever does will appreciate the improvements and stuff. Now, they would not know what it was before, but that's one thing, in going back to Clay's for a moment, that I watched over there with interest, and then saw how in stages Clay's Park, plus read about it, was developed, and the things that were done to make it what it is now, and the plans they have, at least at what I'm hearing, to continue to keep it operational and going as it is. But I'll sit and dream about the area down there being a little park and a little this or that, and I think that could kind of fall under a hobby. I mean, I don't garden. I don't mess with plants too much. Diana is mostly in. I mean, I'll do the physical work to help her, maybe doing the digging and that. But that would be about and really spending time and I think now, as I look back, the most important, I call it a hobby, but watching you all and trying to keep my mouth shut when I think you're idiots, but also, and idiots in the sense that I don't mean it that way, but I don't really agree with your call, but you know what, neither did my parents agree with my call along the way. But I call it kind of a family watching thing, because I smile sometimes and think, you know, you just let it play out, and man, look what took place, how neat. So kind of watching all of you all come through and doing the things you've done in the years that you all have been in the family and together, the grandchildren now, and that little four-legged little character right there has become a hobby. because now our life is revolving now not only around, but also her. So I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, oh yeah. What would you say is your biggest regret, if you have any, if you have a biggest regret? Or what would you have done differently in that situation if you had the chance?
well, at one time I felt, and it's still somewhat of a regret, but yet I do see all of the positives and the direction things have gone, that it should not be. But at one point it lingered, and a little bit it's still there, is that I left teaching, and I don't know where that would have taken me, but I didn't stick it out to give the teaching profession plus coaching a chance. Now, I left because I was stubborn. I left because I thought I had been given a bad deal, didn't get a position I wanted, lateral movement. I left on good terms. I could have gone back in. But as fate would have it, I spent 6 months in a sales training program for a company that was going to be an outside salesperson at. But in that interim, things changed at Clays Park, and I was afforded a full-time job there. So things happen for reasons, but I will say that probably still is a regret somewhat in my mind. And then probably one other one that I'm not so sure that it should be a regret, but I wish I was a little more aggressive in a business opportunity that I afforded myself and my family to get into, but sat on the sidelines and didn't do or say much. And I will say that I wish I would have been more vocal. Those two things. Now, I've had some little bumps in the roads and things that you do along the way that are garbage in, garbage out. Actually, treating Diana a few times the way I shouldn't have. There was just no call for that. But we worked through it, we got through it, and we're still together almost 40-some years later. I could flip that back and say the way she treated me a few times, you know. But this is my regret. But and you know, I really, really, really don't dwell on the past a whole lot. You can't forget it. I like to think for the future and ahead, and that's what excites me about what I think can happen, is coming up, and what's still out there. So other than that job situation and the business-related stuff, a few hiccups and bumps in the road, even with the girls, a time or two that something's come out of my mouth that was hurtful. You know, you don't get in trouble opening your mouth, you get in trouble with what comes out. And so thinking first and then speaking later. But I've gotten better at that, and so I think that that's improvement.
So how did you feel when you found out you were going to be a grandparent? Obviously, this was a long time ago.
Well, and mixed. Mm-hmm. Excited, concerned, and old. Like, wait a minute, grandparent, define that. You know? But yet, I think grandparenting has been an interesting step, and a overall, with the tier of grandchildren that have come, overall a continuing delight.
Gotta tie your shoe. Oh, you had to stick out your mouth, you little stinker. Come here, give me that.
Ball. Maddie, get him his ball. Watch, what's he doing? 5 cuties left. Little bites.
Is that yummy?
Come here, cute. And I now know why younger people have kids, because the energy it takes. And we kidded about that this morning in Sunday school class. I can't remember who I was talking. Oh, Suzanne Trachok. And they have a 2.5-year-old, Nora. Well, she was telling me the other day, Todd watched Nora for a little bit. Suzanne had to go somewhere. It was her day to watch Nora. She wasn't going but a half hour. She come back and Todd was exhausted and ready to hang it up. Well, Todd's probably 10 years younger than I am. And I kidded and said, yeah, baby Avery wears me out, Diana out, and the dog. I said, so they're just such a delight. And now I also see as grandparenting why my grandma and my older aunts used to say, I worry about you kids. I never figure it out then. Never make any sense of it. Like, what do you worry about me for? Look at me, I'm fine, I'm healthy, I'm this, I'm that. But as you see how things evolve, you just want to make sure that, if anything, they get a fair shake, they have an opportunity, and that they're safe, and hopefully healthy and happy. The other things will kind of work themselves out. Whatever career choices they make or whatever.
So when as you get older, do you see yourself becoming, in a lot of ways, like your father as you age, doing things that you're like, oh, I sound just like my dad, or my dad used to do that, now I'm doing it, or you know, that kind of thing? Do you see any of that in your life?
Yeah.
Like you?
Yeah, his yeah, dress. I have some characteristics that I'm very, very proud of. A couple of things. My dad only had an 8th grade education, but he was pretty damn street smart. I think I'm pretty good that way. I think I'm a pretty good judge of people. I mean, I make mistakes, but I'm a pretty good judge of people. And one of them is, if they won't look you in the eye when they're talking to you, then we probably aren't telling you the truth. And he had a good sense that way. Diana tells me, of course, I'm dressing like my dad. I'm walking ahead of the group, 5 feet ahead when we're out, what my dad always used to do. I think my temper is a little better than his. I don't fly off the handle as quickly. So I'm looking at stuff a little more, and I say a little more. I'm not as judgmental. But my dad, I didn't realize this. My brother told me, and I might have shared, my dad didn't have exactly an easy upbringing. And as I think back, as I've gotten older, on some of his mood and some of his demeanor, if in fact some things my brother told me were true when my dad was a younger person, that would have been hard to deal with. My grandpa would, and here again, a side I never saw, my grandpa would get drunk and beat my grandma. Well, my dad would pull him off. My dad was the oldest boy. My dad went to work when he was in 7th or 8th grade, quit school to help support, because my grandpa drank and gambled. And that's not a side I saw him drink, but the gambling part I didn't know about. And then my dad, being the oldest one, was expected to do a lot of the stuff around the house that maybe my grandpa should have been doing. So fast forward to how he would instill in us to learn to mow the grass and cut it, because he was working a lot, to do some things. I wish I would have, and this is one thing about raising your kids too, I wish I would have taken the time to really to show Kristen and Emily a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of a house. That's not to say that when they leave the nest and they get married that their husbands can't take up the slack, but just the little things that would be handy to them to not have to bother their husbands with would have been of help. And so those are the kinds of things that my dad took the time, all the hours he worked, he took time out to coach us guys, my brothers and I, to go to all of our activities at school that he could. And he was there when he could be 100% of the time. When he couldn't, I tried to be that way too, because I saw how much it really affected me. And I think that's important. And the part about, and I think my dad did a pretty good job of this, and mother, we didn't have the sex talks. I mean, my dad might have said 3 words, and mother never said a word to us. But communicate. I mean, communicate and really sit down and talk to your kids and that. My mom and dad had 5 of us. I don't know if they had the time or not. But I think that's a characteristic that I'm proud of, that I'm carrying on. And my dad ultimately put family first. I mean, that's what I'll say about Diana. She will put family first and fight to the end if you're in the right. Now, if you're not, then Diana will back away and tell you. My dad would defend whether you were right or wrong. He would never give up on family. He would get mad as hell, maybe not do the criticism too strongly in front of, but he would stick with you. So I think I'm that way. And kiddingly though, my dad, with the dress part, we laugh, but
I've seen pictures.
yeah, of his leprechaun suit, dressing up at St. Patrick's, and
those big collars,
his green, yellow jacket, his leisure suits. And see, Pop, that's the one thing. Pop grew up in a poor family. He bought his first suit, my aunt told me this story, when he got out of the service and paid cash for it, $22. I see several pictures of my dad in that suit. My dad was proud to dress up. All of his work life, he never dressed up for work. I, being the opposite, school teacher. Now, when I was in my younger years, factory work, yada, 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 yeah, work clothes. But in my more of my career, the work I did for Clay's, when I went out and represented them, I was in suits and ties and sports coats or staff attire. Whoa, you all right? Look at her run. But my father, when he retired, he was always wanting to dress up when he went out. So that was something he was quite proud of. So look at Maggie. Look, she's alert. So those are some of the characteristics that I'm proud of, that I'm like him. And other ones where the stubbornness and the flying off the handle and all that has been reduced down some. But he had a short fuse.
Do you have a favorite, I want to say, author or public figure, or somebody that you admire in your life or that you have in the past, or maybe a favorite quotation by that person? Do you have anything like that you can pull out?
Well, because I followed sports as I got into high school and junior high and played, I've always been impressed with Paul Brown and what he accomplished. And he didn't come from a lot of money. He wasn't famous. How he stood up for himself and the things he did in his career. He was a good judge of character, and not only an athlete with pure athletic ability, but the athlete being a good person and a contributor community-wide, and not just on the field, but what they would do outside of that. He's one that sticks out, and as I read that question, another one that really, even though in the later years your bubble gets burst by what you hear about how they really were, But I admired John Kennedy some, but I definitely liked his comment or his quote, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. In saying that if each one of us, and now there's 300 and some million, back then in the 60s there was 200 and some million, but to say to each person in our, see what little bit you can contribute, because with 220 of us contributing, we've got to be able to be moving up the right way. So he's one that the quote I really felt is really a strong message. And I, again, with my own family, and they're not as a celebrity type, I tell you, I really, there were things I watched about your uncle, John, that I was quite admirable. He didn't always agree with him, but his mannerisms and the way he handled things always seemed to, after I give him some thought, intrigue me. I'll give you an example. We're sitting at the gate one day, and if I told you this, I apologize. We're sitting at the gate one day. He's there, I'm up there. Now this is when I'm full-time. Guy comes up, camper, and he's irate. He just going off. Mr. Clay asked how he could help, and he says, I want to talk to, and yada, 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 yada. Mr. Clay lets him air the deal and says, well, now, who do I see about this? And John O goes, right there, this guy, and walked out. He went, right here. Here's the guy that can help you. Now, here's the guy that owns the place that could have done everything imaginable, and he went like that. And then another time, when he came up to me and he says, puffing on his pipe, plantation hat on, Mike Stevens, tell me a little bit about this motorcycle Annie. And I said, oh, this ought to be good. I said, well, she cleans the restrooms for us. She is widowed, divorced, all the above. So what I was trying to paint the picture bright and early is she needs this job, because I was trying to think where he was going with it. Because he says, well, I was out at the Melody Barn, and I was watching what was going on with the picnic, and here this lady comes around the corner, and she's kind of weaving and walking and weaving, and I noticed she had a beer in her hand. And I noticed she had a Clays Park staff shirt on. Uh-oh. So I watch her get on this scooter, and I watch her drive off across the Melody Barn field. So I'm on my golf cart, and I follow her. And he said, and all of a sudden, I noticed she was driving like she was walking, and then boom, wiped out. So I said, well, Annie, and I explained about the restrooms, and she overall does a good job. I said, she oftentimes, like some of the rest of us, and I threw myself right into the fire, get caught up in the ambience of partying and all that stuff. And I said, so I'll talk to her. And he said, yeah, I think you better. He said, and tell her if she is going to have a beer, not to be in a Clays Park staff shirt. I said, okay. So that kind of a charisma just used to fascinate me, how he would when he asked me some questions that he somewhat already knew the answer. And I hope I don't bore you, but I'll leave you with one more. Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly, I remember Mr. Kelly.
He says to me one day, Mike Stevens, Mr. Kelly, what's he do here? So I told him all the stuff he does and how he's my eyes and ears and behind the scenes. He says, well, does he have a drinking problem? And I said, no, I don't think so. He said, well, I was talking to him out here one morning, early. and he smelled of alcohol. And I said, well, what time of the morning was that? And he said, 9:30, 10 o'clock. And I said, well, let me check into that. Because, man, I didn't know what to say. Well, lo and behold, and this is a true story, at the end of the weekend, or before the weekend, either or, Pop Kelly would go around and tap the beer kegs. Well, some of them had been in the coolers for a while, so we had to make sure that they were not spoiled. So Pop would take a hit of them, and he would tell me, he'd say, hey, and this is Pop talking, said, that goddamn beer keg out in the Melody Barn's flat. And I would go, thanks, Pop, it's called quality control. So I go back to John O, and I tell him, because that was the truth. And you know what he said? Wow. He said, wow. Something like, really? Now, I couldn't have made that up. Pop had to tell me, because I was asking him about something, and I always knew he kept a six-pack in his trunk. So I didn't know if he was nipping that or, no. Because he would report to me. I'd have him inventory, and because Pop come into work early, and he would get that stuff done, and hey, that goddamn beer barn is flat. And I go, oh, then we got to get rid of that keg. Did you mark it? Hell yes. He said, if I can't drink it, nobody can. So John O, when I told him, was totally accepted it. He says, well, he doesn't get close, because he had a follow-up then. He said, he doesn't get close around the customers, does he? And I go, no. I said, Pop's, I said, he's a behind-the-scenes guy. I said, no. And he goes, okay, good. He said, and see, that's how J.O. would come into some things. So I always was admired him about that kind of an approach. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a prejudger. Mm-hmm. He was always given the benefit of the doubt. Now, I dare say, I saw him mad a couple times, and I wouldn't want to be on that end of the equation, but he more than not would give you the benefit of the doubt. And I really think Mr. Clay, John O, would stick up for the little guy too. And that's a trait. When I said, like my dad, I'm proud of him in a lot of ways. He was always in there for the little guy. If there was somebody that didn't have what he had, I remember my mom and dad giving money to some neighbor people that didn't have enough to buy groceries, and they would buy them groceries and things like that. And that was always something that stuck in my mind that he was willing to do. So I hope that answered it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Not many famous people in there, but they're all
no,
good.
It doesn't have to be somebody famous. I guess anybody that you would admire that, obviously fame doesn't preclude that the only people that can be,
Yeah, true.
But so what sort of advice for the future would you recommend for Kristen and Emily and their families? And, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you'd want to impart to your descendants, I suppose, would be?
Communicate with your spouse, communicate with your kids, communicate with your in-laws, your parents, your brothers and sisters, your children. Talk to them. I think that would be something of, and it's something I think is at the utmost value. Try to, and I've not been a good one of this, but try to be an example. You can send mixed signals. I know my mom and dad would tell us not to smoke, is they would sit there, have parties and smoke, just like you tell your kids not to drink and you're sitting there having a beer. Yes, there's an adult, there's a child, there's an adolescent, but I think definitely communicate, be true to yourself, be willing to compromise. I mean, Diane and I, in our will be 42 years of marriage, I know the times we've had knockdown, drag out, nasty arguments has been because one or the other has taken such a stance that there was no room, whether it's something with the kids or something with each other, but you gotta try to find some common ground. And I think being a good listener, I think I've gotten better at that, but be interested in what your kids are doing and communicate, and keep, I guess in summing that up, keep family first. And you can have an extended family too. You can have neighbors and friends and church family and that. Immediate family, they're right there, and then let the other ones, of course, be important. But I will, and again, I didn't practice it at the beginning, but Clays Park, in a lot of ways, was an ideal job for me. It allowed me a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility. It allowed me to make a lot of decisions, a lot of mistakes, without really hanging myself because of the good people that were there. Work to live, don't live to work. And if you have a job that you overall like, and you're making a respectable living at it, value that. Because I can tell you that out of 10 people you talk to, probably 7 of them aren't happy with their work anyway. Not necessarily the money, but with their work. And you spend about a third of your life at work. So the communication part, be true to yourself, try to be a good listener, and be flexible. You know, I'd say, and Emily and Kristen are both good-hearted. They are kind people. Emmy's probably more so out than Critter, but Critter has a soft side of her too. Underneath that Diana personality is a good-hearted, like Diana. That's why I was saying she's kind and caring. I actually think we have done a good job, and Kristen and Emily have carried it on with you guys' children, is considering the other guy. And when you can extend an olive branch or you can help, not expecting anything back, it's because it's the right thing to do. I see Diana and I's daughters doing that. I see my grandchildren doing that. Even though I didn't raise you, I didn't raise Brian, I see your kindness and caring too. So that's a good thing. And the world will be a better place because of that. It really will be. So I hope that helped a little bit.
Do you feel that you nurtured those things in Kristen and Emily?
I think some. I think they've also learned on their own. Life experiences has taught them. They've both had snafus that they can see a road and direction that they don't want to go down. And so I think we've given them enough of a base that they have that opportunity. You know, they've kept an open mind. And again, I always looked at it, and I thank the good Lord that the choices I've made have never been, for the most part, if not all, negative game changers. There's been some game changers, but they've been more the positive. Because actually, and I will go back to one thing when I said teaching, leaving teaching entirely did open up a lot of doors for me. I probably would have never ran for trustee had I not been employed at Clay's, and Clay allowing me, because I asked them if, when I was going to do that, if there was any problem, because it was going to take some of my time away from, but the Clay family being encouraging any of the employees, especially in the so-called supervisor or management, to get involved in the community. Because I was involved in the Chamber of Commerce and the Kiwanis, and I always would say representing Clays Park and all that. Well, elected official was something that they saw and knew in their wisdom, and that was a good feather in the company's cap to have somebody in the elected official arena, even though politicians aren't, thought of entirely highly by a lot of people. But that I think Kristen and Emily do a good job. They get involved, they watch, and I think they both extend a kind hand and heart when needed. So.
So what would you like to say to Avery and Maddie and Hunter on their respective wedding days as advice? Should they? Obviously, we hope they get married as they grow older, and what would be something you would say to them?
You're starting a new chapter in your life. Two become one. So the person you decide to settle in with and unite with, make sure that you understand each other. No, you don't have to agree on everything, but having some understanding going in of what you're getting into wouldn't hurt to know, but also be willing to change and be flexible. Be true to yourself. Don't ever think that you're not of value. Always keep your self-esteem and caring for yourself mentally and physically as number one. And that's something I think, and back to Kristen and Emily, is as we tell them, your health. You want to be around to see this little one. You want to be around to graduate. So take care of yourself. And that's one thing, I guess, to backtrack to what the old auntie and the old granny saw the little 9 and 10-year-old snot-nosed kids running around, breaking a collarbone, dislocating a bone, doing this, doing that, beating themselves up and saying, oh, I worry about you kids because guess what? That 53-year-old knee caught up with me that I needed to get it fixed, and yet that was probably a preventable accident. But, in marriage, you're opening a new chapter. So it's you and that other partner, and you are partners. So that said, make sure you hold your own. You have an equal say, but so does the other person, and that's not always easy. Try not to fight about the little things. Make sure if it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out disagreement, it's going to be one that needs that. What do they say? Marriages, number one thing they fight over is money. Sex is in there somewhere. Just companionship and whatnot, but definitely money. Don't let that be the driving factor either. You can be happy as could be and live paycheck to paycheck. Hopefully that won't have to be the case, but I think those basic things there, health, and so. It doesn't hurt to reflect on the past, but don't dwell on it. You got to move on. And I look back from time to time, I think about certain situations and things that happened, and sure, you'd like to see everyone that has passed away in your life back again, and all your pets and animals that you love dearly back again. But you can't undo all that. You can think about, smile, try to remember, the positive things. But I definitely I definitely see my life so far as being overall a good life. And regrets, as we talked about, sure, you have a few, but too few to mention kind of thing. Not to quote Frank Sinatra in his song, but there are some, sure. But when I look around and see where I'm at and see the people I'm surrounded with and have been surrounded with and all the good fortune, in spite of the bumps in the road, I'm really, really blessed and thrilled to have what Diana and I have accumulated, to have healthy children, son-in-laws, grandchildren, siblings, now pets, and so on. And so looking at all that, I would just say count your blessings and appreciate them, because they really are, social media, the Facebook and all that, opens you up every minute of the day to a scenario that is heart-wrenching, of something that happened to somebody. And you think, oh my gosh, why did that have to happen? How did it happen? That could have been me. And you just you got to be cognizant of saying, thank you, Lord, for the blessings that I have, because I feel my family is truly blessed. And I hope the girls and the grandchildren and all of you will realize, Diana can contest to this, sometimes in Sunday school, when we talk about blessings and how we would give, back in the early Testament, they were always giving the best calf, they were always giving the best sacrifices. I said, I'm a little troubled with that. I don't think I could give always my best lamb, my best horse, my best sheep, my best whatever. I'd give the one in the middle, because I'd keep the best stuff so I'd make sure my herd progresses. If I keep giving away the good stuff, after a while I'm going to have a mediocre herd, then I'm not going to have any animals left at all. Well, it gets explained to me that ain't the way it works. But I had a guy tell me after Sunday school class one time, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, you know what, Mike? You're thinking like a businessman now. So it's kind of like always put back, for a rainy day. And yet I chuckle, but yet seriously, I'm always that guy that says, you know what? I'm doing okay. The good Lord has blessed me 90% of that. The other 10%, I got a dog in the fight. So I've given too. So I say to my kids and grandkids and son-in-laws and so on, just, get your arms around all that and be thankful. And when you have a bad day or stumble, you learn from those negatives. You learn a hell of a lot more from the bad stuff than you do the good stuff. At least this guy has. I remember that, and I'm not going to do it again kind of thing, where that good stuff, you kind of take it for granted and go, oh, well, that's there because I was entitled to it or whatever. Not necessarily, but you remember that hard lump you took. And so I think, and if nothing else, I would hope that would be appreciated and passed along. I do see it in the kids. I see it in the grandkids. I see it in Emily and Kristen and you all. I really do. And I think as you get older, you start to realize and see sometimes the little things that you didn't see maybe when you were in the heat of the battle, that, why'd I miss that? So, because I think, and lastly, once, and I'll never forget, somebody said to me, and I don't remember who it was, but I was complaining about my dad one time doing this or that. Might have been Wally that had lost both his mom and dad. And he said, hey, there'll be a time when they're not here, and then you're going to miss that. You're going to miss that phone call that you think's inconvenience, and my dad's on the other line going, hey, I tried to call, why aren't you answering the phone? I called your phone, Diana's phone. I thought maybe you were over there getting robbed or the house was burning up. When are you going to get that big German Shepherd? You leave Diana there, I can still hear you. You leave Diana there by herself, you need a big dog. Well, look what we got. She'd lick you to death. But those are the kinds of things that really, I feel, and we talk, Diana and I will, that we feel real good about the girls and the grandkids and the family, that we're going to have our backs and forths, but overall, you got a strong thing going here, and united you know, united you rise up, and divided it's a little more tough, if not real tough. So.
Well, thanks. I appreciate your sitting down with me here and going over this.
No, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It made me smile. It made me tear up a few times when I was thinking about, and it makes you again, it gives you an opportunity to reflect, and that's, I admire you for even taking the time out and thinking of that. It's just it's a neat way to do stuff.
All right.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Man, I kept you probably, I don't know what time it is now.